So we're a few years in now to the Shane Beamer era at South Carolina. Fan bases always want things to be linear. Mm-hmm. You win 6 games, then you win 8 games, then you win 10 games. Real world's not always like that. So where is South Carolina football as a program right now as we enter 2024?
Yeah, I think we're on track. Obviously, last season, record-wise, wasn't what we wanted, but I don't feel like I feel like we took a step and we're in a better position now than what we were a year ago. Obviously, to go from 2 wins to 7 wins with a bowl game in our first season was great, and then we took another step the next year, going from 7 to 8, and then 2023 was not what we wanted record-wise, but like I said, we're in a better place right now because of the people that we have in the program, the young guys we brought in, transfers, and like where we are, and certainly again 5-7 wasn't what we're about, and no one's happy about that, but it's that's behind us and moving forward, and couldn't be more excited about the future.
When you go back and you assess, well, let me scratch that, because I know you're assessing week to week. You don't wait till the end of the year to do that. But when you get to the end of the year and you get to do a holistic review on a season, okay, you look at 5-7, that wasn't what we wanted, but that's just wins and losses from the product and the process that produced it. How often can you look at 1 or 2 things and say, that's why we got this? Or is it maybe a cumulative effect of a whole bunch of things?
I think it's a little bit of both, in all honesty, and it is something that throughout the season you're thinking about each week, and you're looking at a big picture thing. And there was a time last year where we were sitting there at 2-6, and at that point you really start taking a look at what we're doing and how we can be better and what the issues are. And a lot of it is off the field. We had 12 season-ending injuries last year, 6 on the offensive line. So from a medical standpoint, from a weight room standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint, looking at, okay, why did we have so many injuries, but specifically, why did we have so many at one position, the offensive line? So as soon as the season was over, sat down with the strength coaches and the training staff, and we literally went through every single injury that we had last season. Why did it happen? When did it happen? How did it happen? Were there patterns or signs leading up to that injury that we weren't aware of? Or maybe is there something that we see now that there was a sign? So that's one thing. But then obviously the football part of it. We played 5 true freshmen started 5 true freshmen last season. Okay, so you're looking at it, me as a head coach, how can we better prepare these freshmen to be even more prepared to play if they get thrown into that situation? And then the schematic part of it, we went through a stretch. If you take the last 3 seasons since we've been here, we've led the SEC in takeaways, if you take defensively, over the last 3 years. But there was a 3 or 4 game stretch last season, mid-season, where we didn't create a takeaway on defense. We didn't get 1 turnover. It's hard to win that way, especially in the SEC. So just things like that you look at. So yeah, it's everything, and it's how can we adjust? How can we be better? There were some things, we do that after every season. There were some things after 2022 that weren't good enough that we improved in 2023. So every year you look at it and how can we be better in the next season, and that's certainly what we did in this instance.
One of the things that fascinates me that maybe no one else cares about, but I don't care because it fascinates me, is when you get to the end of a season, let's say you had a chronic injury problem. Fans notice that too, and so fans will always be quick to go to the call-in radio show or go to the message board and say everything from we need a new cleat provider to we got to alter strength and conditioning, and they can't really know because they're on the outside. You're on the inside, but sometimes you may not have a background in sports science. You may not know exactly what a knee is made of, but you got to make the decision at the end of the day. So what is that information gathering process like? Like, how sold or convinced do you have to be that this can be attributed to this before you say, all right, change it all?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And the thing for me is everyone, it's just society right now in general, it's very much a what's most recent, what have you done for me lately? And last season was not good enough. And it's easy to say, well, this is terrible, replace this, replace that. Well, it's the same strength and conditioning program that we had when we went from 2 wins to 7 wins, and then went from 7 to 8, and had the big wins that we've had in the previous 2 years. It's the same people from that standpoint. Now, don't get me wrong, we're trying to get better. It was a big point of emphasis for us after 2022. Okay, guys, we won 7, then we won 8. We beat our rival for the first time in a while. We beat Texas A&M for the first time ever. We were nationally ranked. How are we going to be better in 2023? Like, nobody's sitting here patting ourselves on the back. So that was a point of emphasis last year. So for me, it was very much, okay, Shane, let's look at the big picture, the last 3 seasons. And obviously the most recent season wasn't good enough, but let's look at the big picture of what we've done. And for me, it's talking to a lot of people. I'm probably too slow at times. I'm very thorough when it comes to making a decision, whether it be a staff member or whatever we're doing in the program, and want to hear different ideas. And I talk to our players. I mean, at the end of the season, I really wanted to get their thoughts on stuff, and essentially just had them kind of give me feedback on every single area of the program. And kind of like a lot of stuff is in the news about the NFL PA surveys on all the NFL teams, and we did something similar even before that. Just I wanted to hear their thoughts on what we're doing in nutrition, on what we're doing on team travel the day before the game, our schedule, coaching, the weight room, training room, equipment room, just, areas of concern, things that we can be better at. So gathered all their thoughts, and then kind of sit back and look at the big picture and say, okay, what do we need to do to be better going forward? And sometimes that's making a change, which we did in some instances, and sometimes that's continuing to do what we've been doing, but let's find a way to be even better. And there was a lot of soul searching throughout our building and all departments this year about, okay, we weren't good enough. And we've kind of talked about it as a team this year, that everything that we do this season, like, it's personal, it's personal accountability.
I was looking at the schedule a little while ago. It looks a little different because you don't have teams you normally play. You do have some teams that you don't normally play. Then you got Texas and OU that come into the conference. One of my favorite things being able to cover just ball in the SEC in general is seeing what it's like going on the road, and seeing how hostile and sometimes how unaccommodating road venues are, how small those locker rooms are, and how big your travel party is. Yeah. Explain to folks who never get to see from your vantage point what it's like. You walk into like Jordan-Hare Stadium or you walk into Neyland Stadium. Some of those road conditions are so decrepit, and it looks like from the 1460s, like gladiators once upon a time could have walked that hall. But yet I wouldn't change it because I love it. Yeah. And yet you take true freshmen on the road every year, and they experience that for the first time. What's that like?
It's a challenge. It's a great point, and it's so true. You go some places where the environment, locker room, and all that is decent, and then you go some places where, we had a game this past season where I had a coach at another SEC school call me and say, hey, just to give you a heads up, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to invest in porta-johns, because there's not going to be enough working toilets in this locker room, and your players are going to be waiting to use the one stall that they have in the locker room.
Yeah.
And and that's not just the players, that's players, coaches, staff as well. I'm like, porta-john, like the things you don't think about as a head coach, So I go to our ops guy, hey, we may need to get some porta-johns for this trip as well, because there's not enough bathrooms. Or it's funny, you go a lot of these places, it's interesting how often hot water doesn't work in the locker room after a game and things like that. But I love it. I mean, that's what being a competitor is about. So we try and educate our guys a little bit beforehand, so they don't get out there on Friday or Saturday when they see the stadium for the first time and lose their minds. You try to educate them a little bit on what the environment's going to be like. Okay, here's the locker room, and here's this and that. And but it is something that is part of it. And coaches say that doesn't matter, and it doesn't at the end of the day. But you're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old guys that, if they walk in the locker room and there's only one bathroom, one stall, that can affect them as well. So having those conversations. But it's not just that. It's, the hotel. And you go some places, there's great places. And you go some other college towns where the environment's not ideal at the hotel you're staying at or whatnot. But, we try and do a great job and make it as smooth as our guys. But that's one of the things that you love. We went out to Missouri my first year, and they were working on the runway there in Columbia, Missouri. So we had to land in St. Louis and bus from St. Louis to Columbia, Missouri and back. And we kind of prided ourselves on being road warriors. That was the theme that week. Now, it didn't work because we lost the game, but trying to sell, that's the edge that we have. And hey, they're going to try and make it as bad on you as possible, or bad for you and uncomfortable as possible. But we love being uncomfortable, and this is what we're built for.
The whole ops side of football, that you would see if you were a fly on the wall in a staff meeting of yours.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. Do me a favor, whether it be a game week or whether it be getting ready for a spring practice, the level of detail that you want to have at your fingertips as a head coach where nothing's left to chance. Like, give folks an example of how deep that goes and the things that may be covered in a meeting that would make people go, wow, like they're paying attention to that?
Yeah, a lot. You know, specifically right now with spring practice, it's just, you know, putting together a practice schedule is something that I do myself, but then not just okay, what we're doing, but who's doing what, the field locations. So like for us on the practice field, there's specific field locations. You know, the field, we have 2 practice fields out there. Which field that we're on, which end of the field that we're on, or is the offense, when we go to this period and the horn blows, is the offense going in? Is the offense coming out? Is it on the 32-yard line or the 36-yard line? So those are all things that I, as the head coach, put together, and then I'm thinking about things, okay, we've been in this area of the field. We don't want to kill the grass because we've been there. We need to make sure we just kind of rotate around. A lot of periods, you guys, you know that there's a lot of periods in practice. Okay, it's a 10-minute period, and if you're the running back, you're going to start out at this drill, but then you're going to rotate halfway through to this drill, just the organization. So I spent a lot of time on that and try and take pride in the detail. We had a couple mishaps today, so I didn't do a good enough job, you know, where we had some coaches that got to the wrong spot. But I learned a lot of things from Kirby Smart when I worked for him his first 2 years at Georgia. And that was one of the things, just the structure of practice and being able to maximize reps with everyone, where no one's standing around, always doing something. But then also the level of detail when it comes to travel. You know, my time with Kirby at Georgia was the first time that we ever, okay, you're getting ready to play a game. Here's who the officials are in the game. And Josh has called more pass interference call penalties than any other official in the league this year. Or last week they had the Auburn-Samford game, and this umpire, he called 6 holding penalties. You know, the level of detail with that. We do it here, but after every away game we'd come in and we would talk about any issues at the hotel, because you're going back to that same hotel probably 2 years later. Maybe not now with the SEC schedules, but you're going back at some point. So if we didn't like this setup in the hotel, let's talk about it and address it. So all kinds of things. You could go on and on about the detail from an operations standpoint. Thank God we have a great one here in George Wynn that is a pro, but those ops guys they have a lot on their plate.
I would say most folks in your profession aspire to be a head coach. Not all of them, but most want to get there. And they grow up playing ball in most cases, then coaching ball, and they work up to where they have their own room, and then maybe they're a coordinator. And then if they get to the level of head coach, sometimes and more lately, you find that some of the last things that you get to focus on are football. You got a whole bunch of non-football things. Paycheck's much bigger, and that's a huge blessing, but with that comes a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with football.
Yeah.
I would argue probably that's more so the case now than ever. You've been a head coach that I would still classify as a fairly new head coach, but you've come along in that age where it was probably evolving and like ramping up more so than it ever has been. So number one, do guys reach out to you for advice on that when they are new head coaches? And number two, like how much has that shifted over the last few years for you?
Yeah, it has. Certainly, younger guys get head jobs, and some have reached out to me just because it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, December 2020 when I got hired. And there were coaches that I reached out to then to pick their brains on stuff, still do. And then that's happened with me as well, guys that get it. I think it's evolved a lot. I grew up, obviously, the son of the head coach, so I saw that. I had a front row seat to it my entire life. But until you're in that chair, you really don't know. And I knew my dad had a lot of things that took him away from coaching, and there was a lot of things that the job entailed. But until you're actually in that chair, you don't realize how much of your job is not coaching on the field. And it's why you hear head coaches that have gone from head coach to assistant, and they're like, I miss being the head coach, certain aspects of it, but man, it's so great just being able to coach again and have my own meeting room and be about football and recruiting only. And I love all the different parts of the job, but it certainly has evolved more than ever before, where, my dad would do spring practice. And then in the month of May, he would go out and speak to hockey clubs, raising money for fundraising. Well, I do that, and I go out and do that in the month of May, and even some in April, Gamecock clubs. But I'm also, 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday night, we had football workouts throughout the day, and then I got on a plane and I flew to Dallas, Texas for an NIL dinner, just to have dinner with some donors out in Dallas, Texas. Went out there, flew out there, had dinner, ate, came right back, got back about 1 o'clock in the morning. I was back in here early the next morning going again. So there's things like that the job has certainly changed. And then with college athletics has changed. But with college athletics changing, then everything that the head coaching job entails has just continued to expand to so much more as well. And there's no like guidebook. I can't pick up the phone and call my dad and be like, hey, how did you handle this from an NIL standpoint? Or how did you handle the transfer portal when you could have a guy that could transfer twice in 1 year if he wanted to? We're all kind of learning and going through it the first time. And fortunately, I'm in a conference with a lot of great head coaches, and we all realize the chairs that we sit in, and there's great camaraderie with one another, being able to reach out to one another and help each other with ideas and things like that.
I want to talk about the private jet life for a second, because the private jet life most people aspire to get to, but they never get there. How crazy is it? You can be in Dallas, Texas, and you know that you could look at your watch and think, all right, if we got out of here right now, I could be in bed in Colombia in an hour 50, maybe 2 hours. Whereas the rest of us understand what the letters TSA mean and understand what waiting in a terminal means. Like, how nice is it to get to that level where you just kind of hop around?
Well, that's great. There's still a whole lot of TSA pre-check and fine commercial for me too. Like, I haven't been doing this that long as well. So my wife and I went somewhere for spring break a couple weeks ago, and we were flying Delta and sitting in the terminal and all that also.
Way to go, man.
Yeah, exactly.
One of us.
Yeah, exactly. And when I get zone 1 on that boarding pass, like, that is a win. Yeah. That has not changed, and I'll never forget my roots. So I still doing that regularly, but fortunately with that trip or recruiting trips, being able to do that is just, it's great. It's like you said, being able to leave Dallas, Texas late at night after dinner and fly back, but get back to your own bed and then be back in here the next morning. It's great from an efficiency standpoint, and fortunate that on that trip we had a great donor that allowed us to use his plane to go out there to Dallas. And then if it's school-related business or recruiting, fortunate that we have, multiple planes here at our disposal here at this university to be able to use them, whether it be myself or Lamont, our men's basketball coach, or Don Staley, being able to utilize that for recruiting also, just from an efficiency standpoint.
You mentioned 2 other coaches there that are having big success at this university right now. And I mean, a lot of folks in the SEC care about football, and yet, when we walk into these buildings, you can clearly tell there is an athletics culture, and the more success more programs are having, obviously the more it bolsters that culture. Yeah. I mean, number one, like, how competitive is it between the programs here? And number two, how much is that self-fulfillment? How much does that kind of breed a culture in a building? Yeah,
it's huge. It starts with our athletic director, Ray Tanner, who won 2 national championships as the baseball coach here. So I've got a boss that has sat in my chair and has won national championships, and is a you have a lot of athletic directors that haven't coached before nowadays. The days of Frank Broyles and Doug Dickey and people like that are kind of gone past. Here's a former coach as well, so that's great to have him as a resource. But then to be able to have the greatest women's basketball coach in the world here on campus that I can reach out to and pick her brain on stuff is awesome. And to be able to go, and it's one thing I love about a college campus, is just being able to be around other great coaches as well. So I love when I'm able to go watch Don's teams practice, or Lamont Paris and our men's basketball coach, being able to go watch his team practice and pick his brain. And the rosters are different. They don't have 120 players on their team like we do in football, but a lot of the issues are the same. And being able to help each other with recruiting, where we've had football recruits that have come through here. Hey, what do you want to do this weekend? Can I meet Dawn Staley? And she's awesome. She's never said no. And same thing with a player that she had last year that she was recruiting, that me and Lamont and I met with as well, along with some of the other coaches. And and whatnot. So it's a great community here. Like I said, it starts at the top with Coach Tanner, but to be able to have great coaches that I can pick their brain on, but then also to be able to say, we've won national championships here at South Carolina. We're doing it in women's basketball currently. We've done it in baseball. We've done it in other sports. There's no reason why we can't do it in football. And certainly, I don't know if pressure's the word, but as a competitor, yeah, absolutely. You want, I know how amazing this fan base is, and I see how they support all of our sports, and you want to be able to bring them a champion.
When you're filling spots on your staff, and you guys just brought some new coaches in, I've always sort of leaned towards the total games coach, the experience factor, because I don't get to sit in an office with those guys. I don't get them for 6 hours like you do. So from the outside, that's always been a metric that I kind of trust. How much emphasis do you place on that? And then above and beyond that, like what goes into the critical factors you define when you're filling out your staff? Yeah,
I think every situation is different for that particular instance. What are you looking for? What does your team need? If you have a receiver's job open, what do your receivers need at that moment? Tight ends, whatever it might be, without a doubt. We've certainly gotten more experience with our hires this year. I mean, being able to bring in Joe DeCamillis to coach our special teams, who's a long-time NFL coach that's coached in multiple Super Bowls, and to bring in Marquell Blackwell to coach the running backs, who's been a coordinator in college. Sean Elliott, who was a head coach in college. Mike Furry, who played in the NFL, coached in the NFL, and was a head coach in college. Love that aspect of it. And they're still young, they're energetic, and they're hungry. And that's where I think we hit a gold mine, in that we were able to bring in guys that have great experience and have accomplished a lot, but they're still really, really hungry, and they have that edge about themselves, about being here, which I love. And it certainly helps in the offensive staff room. You know, we brought in Dow Loggins as our offensive coordinator 2 years ago, and he came into, I don't want to say a tough situation, but he came into a situation where normally if you're a coordinator coming in, you bring someone with you, either maybe your offensive line coach or your tight ends coach, and he didn't bring anybody in with him as far as on the field coaches, because I like the group that we had last year. And then we had some movement on that side of the ball after this past season. So this was one where Dow obviously was involved in the interview process with those guys and has ownership on who we brought in. And there's an unbelievable working dynamic in there right now with the offensive staff and the defensive staff and the staff in general, just because of that maturity and professionalism that we have with these guys. And then as far as critical factors, just one, guys that are good people first and foremost. This profession's hard enough. I don't want to bring a butthole into this building that nobody wants to be around. And, we have core values that we live by in this program, and making sure that those are guys that embody what we want to be about, what I want this program to be about, and are on board with what we're about as well. And then you get in there and you just have a chance to visit with people, and found, with kind of what we needed on the offensive staff and at special teams. To me, these guys were all home run hires from that standpoint.
I assume, like most normal people in a competitive profession, you may have days where you're sitting at your desk and you go, like, what are we doing right now? Maybe as a program, maybe as a sport, what are we doing right now? So it always helps to zoom out and just remember, like, what your why is and what motivates you. And some guys are listen to no noise, chip on their shoulder type guys. Other guys are process oriented. Mm-hmm. What's your source of fuel? Like, what drives you in this profession?
Yeah, first of all, it's still the players. I love to compete, and I love working with young people. So I truly, and I know every coach says it, but I truly, truly, truly care about every single player in this program. And Lenora Sellers, who's one of our quarterbacks, he came to me last year and he's like, "Hey coach, do you really know the name of every player in our program?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "You don't think I do?" He's like, "Well, I don't know if some head coaches do." And I don't know if they do. I'm assuming they do, but do or don't, but absolutely do. And not just their name, but their background and their story, and wanting to connect with them on a deep, deep level. Like, that is why I got into coaching, and nothing has changed. And the opportunity to work with young people on the practice field and work with them on the game field and watch them come in as 17, 18-year-old freshmen and graduate and have a chance to go on to the NFL, that's still what it's all about. And then for me, and here in Columbia specifically, I know how we got the greatest fans in the entire world, and I know how much they want to bring a championship here to Columbia. I was here as an assistant coach with Steve Spurrier when we won the SEC East, and I can remember coming back from Gainesville, Florida, and at whatever time in the middle of the night, and the people that were in that stadium across the street to welcome the team back. And when we beat Clemson 2 years ago, and we bust back from Clemson and we got here, and there were thousands of people right outside these doors here when we got back to Columbia. Like, we have a loyal, amazing, unbelievable fan base, and that's what gets me out of bed each morning, gets me coming into this facility ready to work. The players and the coaches and staff I get to work with, but then wanting to bring a championship to these fans because I know how much it would mean to them. And still working every single day to do that, to bring that championship to Columbia for them.
Last time I was home, I told my mom, hey, we're going out on the road. We're going to do this whole thing. And she said, hey, one thing I'd like you to ask somebody. Do they really need to be in the office that many hours every day? Do they really need to be getting in there at 6 a.m. and leave? What time you leave today?
Today I've got a dinner with a donor to try and raise some money.
We'll count that.
Tonight I'll get out of here about 5:45 because I've got dinner with a donor.
Okay, so Trisha Pate from Fortune, Georgia would like to know, do you really need to be in the office this many hours? Like, what's happening during the day?
It's all structured and regimented and organized. So yes, I would say we do. Now, I'm not one of those guys that wants to say, okay, you got to guard your desk and you got to be there, because I've worked for those guys where, you got nothing going on and you're ready to leave, but you're kind of looking around the corner like, is he gone yet? Is he gone yet? I don't want our coaches to feel that way. I mean, I try and be very efficient. And it goes back to, like I tell our coaches, I want them, I don't want them to miss a kid's sporting event and things like that. You only get one chance to be a dad. And we've got coaches that have a lot of young kids on their staff, on our staff, that have young kids and want them to be a part of that. So we try and be very efficient with our time, but between coaching, recruiting, developing relationships with our players, there's a lot, but we also try and find that balance as well. Like, you can't just grind 24/7, 365, because you're going to wear out. And I believe in being able to get out of the office and being able to go do things and get away from things for a little bit as well. Our players, coaches, and staff. So we're here when we need to be here. We try and be very efficient about getting our work done, but also having time to be around our families and get away from football as well.
What did you think when you heard the news about Nick Saban retiring? I
was shocked. It's one of those, you always remember where you were at that moment. My wife and I were in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was shocked because we had literally just had a SEC head coach's Zoom literally that day. And I think it started at 11 a.m. and we were off the Zoom at like 12:15 that afternoon. And it was less than 4 hours later, I think, that news came out. So my wife, I still remember we went to an Atlanta Braves game 2 summers ago, and we were driving from the Atlanta Braves game, and she tells me that Texas and Oklahoma are coming in the SEC, and I'm like, what are you reading? Like, you need to get off the internet, get off your phone. And then she told me that as well. She was on her phone, and she's like, Coach Saban's retiring. I'm like, stop. We just had that Zoom. So I was shocked from that standpoint, because it wasn't like he was on the Zoom and he was active on it. It wasn't like he was sitting here like, I'm about to announce my retirement in 4 hours. Like, he was very outspoken on it. So initially shocked, but then after that, I don't know if sadness is the word, but disappointment. That happy for him, disappointment selfishly that he wasn't going to be a part of our game anymore because of what he's meant to college football. And I mean, I can't lie. I mean, it was still, last time we had an in-person SEC head coaches meeting with him in it was last May in Destin. And there's still a point of me. I mean, I'll be 47 at the end of March, so I still feel like I'm young. I mean, there's still a part of me that I walk in a meeting and it's like, that's Nick Saban as well. And he's a competitor and all that as well. But there's great respect for him for what he's accomplished, and being able to just listen to him in those head coaches meetings and learn from him and his insight. There was a little bit of sadness from my standpoint, but then happiness for him that for all he had accomplished, and he felt like he was at a place where he could do that.
There's always this belief that head coaches must be privy to all this stuff that's coming down the road. Like, yeah, the public's taken aback by it, but head coaches, they surely would know about this stuff. And yet you mentioned Texas and OU, blindsided.
Nothing.
Saban retires, blindsided.
Yeah.
And there's got to be other announcements and rule changes that even catch you by surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, how frequent is that, where something that's either in your world or may directly impact your job happens and you go, what? I just found out from my wife. What?
Yeah, exactly. No, those are two examples. And even with OU, like, I had literally worked in Oklahoma the year before, and nobody over there gave me a heads up. Not that the people over there needed to, but that was one that was interesting as well. I'd say quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot that either our athletic director, Coach Tanner, will give me a heads up on, hey, this could be coming down the pipe. Or we're in an SEC meeting and Commissioner Sankey gives us a heads up on this may be trending in this direction. But there's a lot that happens that I find out. Sometimes I'll have someone in the media call me to ask me a question. I'm like, I should be asking you. You know more about this than I do. Someone called me last week about, what are you hearing about? I know there's 2 ACC schools that are suing the ACC. And someone called me to ask me about that, and I told them I find out my information reading what you write. So I don't know why you're asking me, but there's it's one of those. I guess you're on a need to know basis, and when I need to know stuff, people will let me know.
So if we're looking at South Carolina now, spring of 2024 is underway. A lot of people are focused on quarterback position. I'd like you to talk about that, but then extending beyond that, like, what are the specific points of emphasis with this team this spring?
Yeah. One, like a lot of teams in college football, we have so many new faces, and every single year it's starting over. You know, like 2023 team, I think we had 40 new players on the team that weren't even there the year before when we won 8 games. And so it's one, how connected can we become, and how quickly can we become really connected as a team? And get these new faces and new people, whether it be freshmen. Nowadays in college football or in high school, so many guys graduate high school early. So our entire freshman class is here right now, except for 3 scholarship guys from the state of Georgia that aren't here right now. But everybody else is here. So getting these freshmen acclimated, new transfers coming in, that's kind of the main point of emphasis. And then because we have so many new faces, let's figure out, kind of who we are as a team and what these guys can be. We're fortunate in that we bring back a lot of leadership, a lot of guys that have played a lot of football around here. I mean, there's still a boatload of guys that were here when I got hired in December of 2020 that are still on this team and that have been around here for a while now. And then a lot of guys that were a part of that first recruiting class that we brought in right after that as well. So we've got a good combination, a good mix of veteran guys that have been around here for a while that are not happy about last season and are super hungry and super motivated, and then a good mix of new faces, talented, athletic new faces as well. So like where we are, there's a lot of competition out on the practice field right now. We have lost a lot of production, but we have brought in a lot of production from the transfer portal and high school recruiting. And I think our depth is better across the board. If you look at all of our positions, I really feel like we're deeper from a depth standpoint than we were last season. And that's exciting. And let's kind of get out there and compete and figure out how this whole thing shakes out.
It's a really weird situation now, just with rosters across the country, where there's not a whole lot of rules on player movement and when players can move. It's just kind of free reign right now. Have you had to adjust anything about how much you check in on guys and make sure and take their temperature, especially in spring, because you got a post-spring portal window coming up, making sure you good? I know you always would have done that. Is there maybe a little volume knob turn up now because you know the climate's so unstable?
Yeah, absolutely. You're correct in saying that we've always done that. I hear people say all the time, every year you got to re-recruit your own team. You got to re-recruit your own team. And I get that, but I don't look at it that way. I mean, I'm a relationship person and truly, like I said, care about all these guys and have relationships with them. So to me, it's just continuing to do what I've always done, what we've always done as far as building relationships. But I'm also would be naive if I didn't think there were people in their ear telling them, hey, you'd be better off somewhere else. And these guys don't know how to use you. You'd be better off here. So I understand that that it's out there. We only have them in this building 4 hours a day, and there's 20 hours a day that they're outside this building if they choose to be. So understanding the noise they're hearing when they're outside this building in regards to that. So certainly the knobs are a little bit twisted and tighten them up as well, because it is different. There's no question about it. But again, we want to just continue we're going to be who we are. We're not going to be fake by any stretch of the imagination. Be who we are, coach these guys up, pour into them, make this a place that they don't want to leave. And if someone feels like they have a better situation elsewhere, wish them well. But I always think back when there was one year I went and visited the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Bruce Arians was the offensive coordinator at the time, who ended up going to the Bucks and won a Super Bowl, and the Cardinals. And I went up there in May for OTA's minicamp, and I can remember sitting in an offensive meeting that Coach Arians stood up in the front of the room, and here it is, like, you're watching the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I remember him saying, "This ain't the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is just a bunch of dudes trying to make the team. Like, the Pittsburgh Steelers, we'll know who the Steelers are in September when we kick it off, because that's the team, when the team's going to be." And it's not like that, but I don't know truly who's going to be on our team until the middle of May, because that's when the portal closes. So I hope we don't lose anybody that's currently on our team. Last year we brought some guys in the month of May that transferred from other schools. So every coach in America truly does not know who is going to be on their team until the middle of May. So in a lot of ways, it really hasn't changed how I do things, but you just also keep that in the back of your mind too, that it makes the summer even more critical once you get those guys here, because there's a short time frame to ramp up to the season.
Last one here. You mentioned you won't really know what your crystallized team is until May. That's what a lot of coaches are saying. I don't know many of you guys who like it that way, but it is the way it is right now. Yet it's out of your control. You can't change the rule. So as much as you try and stay focused on the task at hand and worry about things you can control, what is the thing out of your control that you spend the most time thinking about or checking on or reading about or being focused on?
Great question. Probably the thing that you say other coaches don't like and are concerned about, the calendar and whatnot, the rules governing college athletics. I guess in some ways it's under I have a say, but I'm not making the rules. Now, we as coaches can help shape things and give direction, but that's people like way above our heads that are making rules. And that's probably something. I've been to Washington, D.C. twice now in the last year to go to Capitol Hill and meet with congressmen about.
What a headline, by the way. What a headline.
Yeah.
Tell yourself 10 years ago.
Exactly. That's another one my dad wasn't doing.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I was up there with Coach Staley for that one as well. And that's just one of those that you spend a lot of time up there and don't know how much we got done. So that's something that certainly I think a lot about, the calendar and how things can be better, and I want what's best for the game. But in the short term, there's not a whole lot I can do about that right now. So it's getting back to your focus on what you can control, and that's your team, our team here in this building as well. But there is a lot of stuff going on out there in college athletics, but it just seems like it changes every week in regards to rules, calendar, when they can transfer, when they can't transfer, NIL, this is happening, that's happening, this conference is doing this school suing this conference. I mean, that's just a lot that is going on. So stay, tunnel vision on what you can control, and that's right here.
Now, so I'll get you out here on this part. So you went up to Capitol Hill. You're a guy who coaches in front of 80 to 100,000 people multiple Saturdays in the fall. You're a front-facing fixture of an SEC program. So you speak publicly, you appear publicly a lot. But then you go to Capitol Hill. Did the palms get a little sweaty? Like, how did you feel that day? What was the vibe on Capitol Hill?
It was awesome. Like, I love history, so being up there and being in the U.S. Capitol and the history in that building was awesome, just because I'm a history buff and I love all of that. I probably, if I need to get my mind off football, I enjoy just keeping up with politics and things like that. So yeah, it was pretty cool to be able to walk through those halls and see different people that are, famous senators, congressmen, whatnot, and being able to meet with people, and just the people in your own state, being able to meet with, Tim Scott, who ran for president, or Lindsey Graham, or Jim Clyburn, or Nancy Mace, or whoever, all the different people from Russell Fry, and so many people from here in Jeff Duncan here in South Carolina, but then the other ones that you walk past, you walk down the hall and you'd be like, oh, there's so-and-so's office, there's so-and-so's office as well. And then there was another trip that we took up there that was, you talk about palm sweaty, someone arranged like a private tour of the Pentagon while we were up there. So that was pretty awesome as well, to be able to see the security level and everything in that also. But yeah, the palms are sweaty because you don't want to like say something. I'm up here for a reason. I don't want to say anything that's going to screw this whole situation up. So just speak when spoken to and try and keep it right there. But everybody was just going back to Coach Staley. Everybody was enamored with Coach Staley. I might as well not even have been there because walking through the halls of the Capitol, everybody wanted to take a picture with her and things like that as well, which was refreshing.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, sometimes I focus on politics to take my mind off football. Like, it's the first time I've ever had that one thrown at me.
Well, if I'm at home and I'm calling recruits and texting with them and I'm watching sports on television, which I always do, it's good every once in a while just to kind of see what's going on in the political world.
You quickly dive
And then I listen, I say, you know what, I got it pretty good. Coaching college athletics is not so bad.
Coach, we appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.